It is overtime here again at Old Favorite Friday, where we're continuing the conversation about a classic beer, a beer that's been around since 2001 is when this beer was first input to the Beer Advocate database, where I get a lot of my information about how old beers are. And that is Lagunitas Maximus. They call it a colossal IPA, Ralph. This is such a throwback for me. And I'm dating myself a little bit, which I think I do in all these videos. And the fact that I remember when these were in 22-ounce bombers, and it was a beer that or friends of mine would trade for when it wasn't available down here. I used to love, and I still do, I love the Lagunitas brand. And so many of the beers, when I saw this on the store shelf, I had this throwback to all those classic Lagunitas beers, Brown Sugar, and all these other ones that are out there. And I said, oh, this is the perfect beer. Because I love these big malty IPAs. What do you think?
So pretty much agree with everything you said, because I was always a big fan of Lagunitas, obviously being the hop guy. Like they have this, Hop Stupid.
Hop Stupid, that was a great one, yeah.
They do a bunch of great hoppy beers. And while we probably say this quite a bit, I would say this is the closest to me to really being like classic West Coast, if you're really saying like, let's really go way back to yesteryear. Because as we were kind of talking about a little bit earlier, it's definitely got a sweetness, like a high level of sweetness, but then the hops are straight like dank. It's like straight old school West Coast. There's no like, not in a bad way, but there's like no fruit about it. It's very much like that herbal pithy. Like, yeah, there might be a little grapefruit, but it's very much a classic West Coast kind of beer.
Yeah, this isn't, there's nothing hazy about this, hazy IPA with tropical fruit. I'm getting all this like sweet honey malt, which there was a lot of beers that were in this style. Maharaja by Avery rings a bell as far as being kind of a big malt forward, nice bitterness balanced by some good sweetness. We don't see that very much. We don't see really big malty IPAs, even in this 9%. This is a 9%. It's called a colossal IPA on the label. We would probably call this a double IPA. We see triple IPAs now. I remember it's going to the triple IPA, but Devil Dancer by Bell's, which had a lot of sweetness to it. I really like that juxtaposition of having that like big dank hop flavor with some bitterness and some sweetness to balance it out. I think we did this with a West Coast, like a straight West Coast style IPA months ago, and we did a West Coast IPA as a collaboration with the Tank because we were talking about it. Now I'm drinking this and going, Ralph, let's put your thinking cap on. Let's do a big, sweeter double IPA.
Yeah, and that's actually not a bad idea at all, because I was even just going to say, especially nowadays where, obviously it's calmed down a little bit, but we went from IBU wars to how many like pounds per barrel can we get into it? And so like you could actually use a bit of this sweetness, because a lot of them, now the New England thing's starting to get, on the sweeter side. For the most part, it's like, let's drop out all malt and just hop, the holy bejesus out of it. And when you're going to those like ridiculous pounds per barrel, you need something to balance it. So this to me is it's punchy in the face, it's like it's smooth for its 9%, but it very, very much is a West Coast, what we used to call more on the end of being like a palate record, as we would say back in the day. But like the sweetness really balances that, where if I were to have this beer now made the way some of these beers are now, it just wouldn't work, because all you would have is just hops hitting you in the face with nothing to kind of like be in that background.
Well, there's kind of a delineation between when you get to these double IPAs that they should have they shouldn't just be an IPA like normal with a different ABV, right? Yeah. There's some natural things that are going to be different when you raise the ABV. You start with extra sweet malt sweetness, you have to ferment that out. So there's going to be some natural differences. But I like the idea of having a juxtaposition of being like a really light, clean beer, and all of a sudden the double IPA brings in more sweetness and more body. You probably can't see it as much on camera, but this has got this beautiful golden honey, hints of orange on it. You can tell that the malt bill was actually thought through. Yeah. And now I feel like the malt bill in IPAs is just a bunch of Pilsner malt, and that's it, because you want the malt bill to be clear, and you want the hops to add haze, right?
I was gonna say, you're giving away my secrets. We have to turn this off now. But and unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what you're into, that kind of tends to be it, where whether it's, because of brewers or customers or whatever, there's kind of like, let's hide the malt and we have hops, it's fine. You don't need to like you said, it's just Pilsner malt and whatever. And like, it's nice to see, like, you make a beer, you gotta think about yeast, you gotta think about malt, you have to think about everything. So it's nice to see that done here, where it's not just like, we'll ignore everything else, like, what's house yeast, what do we have now? Like, everything feels like it was placed on top on it. Like if you're making a sandwich, you do things in a certain way for a reason.
Things are layered.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And I feel like this was layered purposefully.
Well, and that's the thing is we go back to some of the complexities that we're looking for, and beers not to be a one-trick pony. We saw this back in the day around the time this beer was really popular. I mean, not that it's not popular today, but you know when it was introduced and this style was more in your face. These kind of malty double IPAs, we saw the IBU wars where everything was just bitter, 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 and that was kind of one note. But that can be done well if you layer and put all the flavors together. You know, I loved when I first got into IPAs. This was the kind of IPA I wanted to make. Back in the day, my early career, I helped develop a double IPA called Scoundrel for a brewery that I worked for before, and this was one of the beers that I built that off of. That concept came from this. So I'd love to see. I love seeing this beer on the store shelf. I found this at a you know, a convenience store, a C store as we call it, which was exciting to see that. I know, you know, Lagunitas is a big brand, but you know, seeing that in that context was wonderful. And I'd love to see this beer, this style of beer, have a little more of a resurgence. I mean, you're the IPA guy. Maybe you can say that's happening or that's not.
Yeah.
But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely not mind this because these, in that way, I'm on the same page as you. These are like, this would have been something I definitely traded for, and like, yeah, like you said, the whole thing. And so I drank these for a long time and still obviously drink them now. And so I don't know, I was gonna say, I definitely could do it and I'd be down. I don't know if it's gonna take over because even now with like the modern West Coast, that's kind of delineated a little bit, but I would definitely not be against us making one of these.
Well, you never know. Listen, 3 or 4 months from the time this video is recorded, Ralph probably is gonna have this kick-ass, big malty double IPA with the Barrel of Monks twist, at least if I have anything to say about it, which I probably don't. But I hope we get a chance to do that. I hope you get a chance to drink some Lagunitas Maximus. This is a classic beer. This is a definition of an old favorite for Old Favorite Friday. Still as delicious as it was back in the day, widely available from a great brand, and we hope you go pick it up and drink it this weekend. Tell us what you're thinking about this beer. Tell us if it reminds you of this classic style and how it compares in your mind to the IPAs that are being kicked out these days. Please also poke around on the channel, like, subscribe, see some of the other videos. We just talked about another great IPA in resin last week, so go look at that video and keep giving us your feedback. We really appreciate it. We'll see you next week on Old Favorite Friday. Cheers.
Cheers.